January 17, 1945. Peleliu Island, Pacific Ocean. The sun beat down mercilessly on a scarred coral reef, turning sand into a scorching white mirror. Smoke curled from craters where artillery had landed hours before, drifting over jagged rocks and shattered palm trees. The air was heavy with salt, gunpowder, and the metallic tang of blood. A group of Japanese Marines crouched in a shattered bunker, rifles trembling in their hands. Their eyes, hardened by months of war, widened in disbelief. Across the open stretch of sand, under the shadow of machine gun fire and the occasional hiss of mortars, an American Navy Corpsman knelt beside a wounded Marine. His hands moved deliberately, almost serenely, applying bandages, morphine, and sulfa without hesitation. Not a flinch, not a shout, not a single glance at the chaos around him. To the Japanese watching, it seemed impossible, an unnatural calm, a quiet defiance of death itself. And in that moment, the battlefield paused, if only for a heartbeat, to witness courage that was not about firepower, but about steadfast humanity. By early 1945, the Pacific War had entered one of its bloodiest phases. The United States Marine Corps, seasoned by campaigns in Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and Saipan, was pushing relentlessly toward the Japanese home islands. Each island seizure came at a price measured in blood, sweat, and fire. Peleliu, a small coral atoll in the Palau archipelago, promised neither strategic grandeur nor easy victory. Its airfield, however, offered the U.S. command a foothold to isolate Japanese positions further west and support the advancing fleet. The Japanese defenders, though outnumbered, were well dug in and trained in a doctrine of attrition. Japanese Marines and Army personnel had fortified the island with tunnels, bunkers, and natural coral ridges, turning every ridge and rock into a potential death trap. Their strategy was not one of swift engagement, but of relentless delay. Every meter of ground taken by American forces would cost lives. American, Japanese, and sometimes local forced laborers pressed into defensive work. Their mindset was conditioned by years of indoctrination. Surrender was shame, death in battle honor. Each Marine carried this philosophy not just as doctrine, but as a mental shield against fear. Across the Pacific, American forces had developed a contrasting doctrine. The U.S. Navy Corpsmen, attached directly to Marine rifle companies, were trained to administer emergency care under fire. Morphine syrettes, sulfa powder, field dressings, and makeshift splints were standard. Corpsmen were instructed to stabilize the wounded as quickly as possible, often while bullets and shrapnel whistled past. Unlike most frontline troops, medics were expected to prioritize life over combat effectiveness, a principle so ingrained that it became almost ritual. Their calm under pressure was not natural, but forged through rigorous training and repeated exposure to death. American planners knew that casualty care could dictate morale. A Marine who saw his wounded comrades treated quickly, even under fire, was far more likely to press forward. The psychological impact of medics moving through open fields, administering aid without panic, could bolster the fighting spirit of an entire platoon. For Japanese observers, accustomed to the chaos of sudden attacks, this composure was alien. Japanese doctrine emphasized shock, speed, and psychological dominance. Yet here was a force unmoved by terror, working quietly amid devastation. Peleliu itself presented extreme challenges. The island was only 7 square miles, but every foot was contested. Coral ridges rose sharply, their jagged edges concealing firing positions. Pockmarked beaches gave way to dense vegetation, and inland, mangroves and hidden caves provided shelter for snipers and machine gun nests. Heat and humidity were constant adversaries, sapping strength and increasing the risk of heat stroke. Fresh water was scarce, ammunition was heavy, and medical supplies were precious. For every Marine wounded, the likelihood of recovery depended on both skill and luck. As the first waves of U.S. Marines landed in September 1944, they encountered a defense unlike any previous campaign. Unlike at Tarawa, where frontal assaults dominated, Peleliu demanded tactical precision and nerve. Every corpsman knew that moving into the open meant exposure. Japanese gunners, concealed in well-constructed positions, had the advantage of surprise and range. The tension was suffocating. For those watching from hidden bunkers, the Japanese Marines, the behavior of these American medics was almost incomprehensible. Here were men moving deliberately across sand and shellfire, administering care without flinching, often while their own comrades were being struck down mere feet away. Field manuals could teach procedure. Courage was more elusive. Yet American medical training instilled both. Drills simulated artillery, gunfire, and chaos. Corpsmen practiced under smoke, with live-fire exercises designed to mirror battlefield stress. By the time they reached Peleliu, they were conditioned to focus on one task at a time: locate the wounded, stabilize them, and evacuate if possible. Everything else, the noise, the explosions, the screams, was background. It was this combination of doctrine, discipline, and human resolve that would astonish Japanese Marines. They had prepared for shock and terror. They had prepared for chaos. What they had not prepared for was calm. And it was this calm, radiating outward from a single figure kneeling beside a wounded Marine, that would leave a lasting impression on all who witnessed it. By the time U.S. forces fully committed to the Peleliu campaign, the numbers were staggering. The 1st Marine Division, alongside attached Navy Corpsmen, faced approximately 11,000 Japanese defenders, many of whom had been preparing for months within fortified caves and coral ridges. The Marines' initial intelligence had underestimated the depth of the defenses. What appeared as lightly held ridges were actually interconnected networks of tunnels and firing positions, allowing the defenders to emerge unpredictably and vanish just as swiftly. Every ridge, every coral outcropping, could conceal a sniper, a machine gun nest, or a hidden artillery emplacement. The first wave of landings met with intense fire. Japanese mortars, artillery, and small arms created a landscape of chaos. Smoke from explosions mingled with the salty haze of the ocean, reducing visibility and heightening the sense of disorientation. American corpsmen, though attached to rifle companies, were immediately thrown into the center of this storm. Their role was clear: reach the wounded, apply aid, and ensure their evacuation, all while under fire. To many Japanese Marines watching, the audacity alone was astonishing. They had been trained to expect panic, disarray, hesitation, but these medics moved with a deliberate serenity that defied expectation. Terrain intensified every challenge. The beaches were narrow, littered with coral fragments and debris from previous bombardments. Inland, jagged ridges rose abruptly, peppered with interconnected caves that acted as natural bunkers. Heat and humidity drained energy rapidly, while tropical diseases and scarce potable water added an invisible layer of danger. The Japanese had spent months conditioning themselves to exploit every environmental advantage. They had prepared for ambushes, flanking maneuvers, and relentless American assaults. Yet here, on the open sand and exposed ridges, the medics' calmness was a new variable, one that disrupted the expected rhythm of the fight. Eyewitness accounts and post-war testimonies reveal the specifics. One Japanese officer noted in his diary, "They moved with no fear. Even as we fired upon them, they bent over their wounded without haste. It was as if bullets could not touch them." American reports, similarly, emphasized the precision and efficiency of corpsmen in these extreme conditions. Within minutes, a wounded Marine could receive bandaging, morphine, and evacuation instructions. This efficiency reduced mortality rates dramatically, even in situations where artillery and sniper fire were unrelenting. The Japanese had not anticipated that medical care could influence morale so directly. Corpsmen were often unarmed or minimally armed, carrying only sidearms in rare cases. Their courage was purely defensive in nature, the act of preserving life amid destruction. This composure, however, had tactical implications. Japanese Marines observed that American riflemen fought with greater determination when they knew aid was available nearby. The calmness of the medics acted as an anchor, stabilizing entire units in the midst of chaos. For the Japanese, who relied on psychological dominance and fear, this steadiness was a puzzle. How could men so seemingly vulnerable to fire remain unshaken? The island's compact geography meant that every action was highly visible. A corpsman moving across open ground was fully exposed to enemy observation. Yet their movements were precise, methodical, and deliberate. They seemed to exist in a different time scale. While explosions erupted, Marines shouted, and shells fell, the Corpsmen operated on a rhythm of calm, almost ritualistic care. Japanese snipers sometimes paused, bewildered at this unexpected audacity. Their usual tactic, targeting those most likely to panic, was less effective when their target exhibited no panic at all. The result was a subtle, yet powerful shift in the battle's tempo. While U.S. units were exhausted, low on ammunition, and under continuous assault, the presence of skilled, composed medics allowed frontline Marines to regroup, press forward, and maintain cohesion. Japanese observers took note. The calm, methodical care of the wounded was not merely an act of compassion. It was a force multiplier. This realization would challenge assumptions about American behavior and influence the Japanese assessment of morale and combat effectiveness. By the time the second week of the campaign began, the Japanese were no longer merely defending positions. They were analyzing the Americans in real time, noting patterns, reactions, and the almost unnatural composure of the medics. This intelligence gathering, focused on human behavior as much as troop movements, highlighted a battlefield truth. Courage could manifest not only in killing but in preservation. It was in this context, the combination of harsh terrain, overwhelming odds, disciplined training, and psychological astonishment, that the stage was set for the moments the Japanese Marines would never forget. Across open sand, under the eye of enemy guns, the calmest of American medics would soon shape the very flow of the battle itself. For the American Corpsmen, courage was not a matter of instinct. It was trained, rehearsed, and ritualized. They had been conditioned to act deliberately in moments when fear could paralyze others. The human brain, when exposed to extreme stress, naturally prioritizes survival, often at the expense of others. Yet for the medics on Peleliu, survival was measured not just by their own safety, but by the lives of the Marines around them. Each motion, unwrapping a bandage, applying morphine, or directing stretcher bearers, required the suppression of instinctive fear. Accounts from survivors reveal a consistency. Corpsmen moved as though insulated from chaos. Bullets whistled past, explosions tore through the air, and yet their focus never wavered. One Marine later described a Corpsman kneeling beside him. "I thought I was going to die, but he didn't flinch once. He looked at me, checked my leg, and kept talking calm, like the world hadn't ended around us." This human calm became contagious. Marines around them reported that seeing a medic working without hesitation steadied their own nerves, creating a microcosm of composure amid destruction. The human element, the quiet courage of one, radiated through the squad, shaping behavior and decisions under fire. Angle 2. Tactical, medics as force multipliers. Beyond the psychological impact, the calm composure of medics had tactical consequences. In conventional terms, a soldier's ability to recover from injury and return to the fight directly influenced unit cohesion and combat effectiveness. On Peleliu, the Japanese had counted on high casualties to break the morale of the Marines. Instead, the methodical care administered by medics countered this strategy. American riflemen pressed forward with renewed determination when they knew aid was nearby. Every Corpsman moving into fire created a zone of stability in an otherwise chaotic battlefield. Tactical studies from the campaign show that units with active medical support suffered lower mortality rates and maintained higher rates of offensive action compared to unsupported squads. The medics' calm under fire allowed platoons to consolidate gains, hold contested positions longer, and recover faster from ambushes. In effect, these medics were more than caregivers. They were tactical assets, silent anchors, shaping the rhythm of combat. Japanese observers, trained to expect hesitation and panic, often misjudged the battlefield. The movement of Corpsmen gave the impression of fearlessness that exceeded typical human limits. Their presence slowed Japanese exploitation of wounded zones and disrupted the expected psychological impact of heavy fire. In small but cumulative ways, calm medics altered battlefield tempo, allowing Americans to sustain offensives longer than anticipated. Angle 3. Japanese perspective, cultural shock, and psychological disbelief. For the Japanese Marines observing from bunkers and caves, the medic's behavior was alien. Japanese doctrine emphasized surprise, intimidation, and psychological dominance. In prior engagements, Even a brief moment of panic among American troops could be exploited to devastating effect. Here, however, corpsmen exposed themselves to open fire without hesitation, attending to the wounded with measured, almost ritualistic care. Post-war testimonies from Japanese veterans described this astonishment vividly. One officer wrote, "They moved like shadows, untouched by the storm of our fire. We expected fear. We expected screams. We expected chaos. But they simply worked as if death were not present." The cultural contrast was stark. In Japan's military ethos, surrender or survival at all costs was acceptable. Fear was expected but not to be ignored. Observing Americans who confronted danger while serving others, without weapon in hand, without panic, challenged deeply ingrained assumptions about courage, fear, and battlefield behavior. This shock was more than emotional. It influenced decision-making. Japanese troops hesitated when aiming at medics, unsure if targeting them would alter the Marines' resolve. They had anticipated resistance, not deliberate calm in the face of imminent danger. The human psychology of selfless courage, trained and honed into ritual, became a disruptive force in the Japanese mental map of the battle. The medic's calm was not only a product of training, but also of technology. By 1945, U.S. Navy Corpsmen were equipped with field kits designed for maximum efficiency under extreme conditions. Bandages, morphine syrettes, sulfa powder, and intravenous saline, all compact and easily accessible, allowed medics to stabilize the wounded quickly. Portable stretchers and improvised litters enabled evacuation even across open fire zones. Morphine, in particular, was a critical tool. Administered rapidly, it alleviated pain and reduced panic among severely injured Marines, allowing them to remain conscious while being moved to safety. Sulfa powder, the first widely used antibiotic in battle, prevented infection and improved survival rates. Each piece of equipment had been selected, tested, and refined for battlefield efficiency. Japanese medics, by contrast, were often limited in both quantity and scope of supplies. While courage existed on both sides, the American advantage in medical technology amplified the effect of calm under fire. A corpsman with the right tools could stabilize multiple casualties simultaneously, creating a perception of near-superhuman effectiveness among both American troops and Japanese observers. In the chaos of Peleliu, technology and discipline intertwined, making calm not just a matter of human resolve, but a practical, repeatable battlefield force multiplier. Angle 5. Moral courage without arms. Perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of the corpsmen's conduct was moral. Many of these medics carried no weapons or only a small sidearm. Their mission was not to kill, but to preserve life. In the heart of combat, this principle demanded a unique form of bravery. Facing machine gun fire, artillery bursts, and shrapnel, these men had no option for immediate retaliation. Their only recourse was calm, deliberate action. This moral courage reshaped perceptions of battlefield heroism. Where traditional valor was measured by offensive success or enemy casualties, the medic's heroism was measured by lives saved. A corpsman crawling through open sand, administering aid under fire, embodied a different metric of courage, selflessness in the presence of overwhelming danger. To Japanese Marines watching, this was incomprehensible. The idea of exposing oneself deliberately, not for attack, but for preservation, defied their expectations of human behavior in combat. This moral clarity, courage directed entirely toward others, became a defining lens through which the Battle of Peleliu would later be remembered. Angle 6. Leadership, anchoring the fighting force. Leadership in combat is often considered the domain of officers and NCOs. Yet at Peleliu, Navy corpsmen exercised a quieter, subtler form of command. Their presence allowed squad leaders and platoon commanders to operate with confidence, knowing wounded Marines would not be abandoned. In essence, the medics provided a psychological backbone to the front line. Commanders leveraged this reliability to plan movements that might otherwise have been too risky. Knowing that casualties could be stabilized and evacuated, leaders could order assaults across exposed terrain, coordinate flanking maneuvers, or hold positions under heavy fire. The calm of the corpsmen propagated outward, shaping unit cohesion and enabling tactical flexibility. In moments of intense crisis, Their deliberate actions anchored the fighting force, allowing others to act decisively. Japanese strategists, observing these patterns, noted an unexpected operational variable. The Americans' medical discipline enhanced their offensive capability. The enemy had accounted for weapons, fortifications, and firepower, but not for courage combined with technical skill and moral clarity. The Corpsman's comm became both shield and catalyst, silently altering the tempo of the engagement in ways that weapons alone could not achieve. With these angles understood, the stage is set for the decisive moments, the climactic events that would leave both sides stunned and mark the turning point of the engagement. The morning of September 15th, 1944, was heavy with smoke and salt-laden wind. Peleliu's sun had just risen over jagged ridges, casting long shadows across a scarred beach. The American advance had stalled. Japanese snipers and machine gun nests emerged from coral caves with precise timing, cutting down squads in moments. The Marines were pinned, their progress measured in feet, each step a battle against fire and terrain alike. Amid this chaos, a wounded Marine lay exposed on a small sand ridge, a bullet wound to his leg bleeding profusely. Around him, his comrades huddled, uncertainty freezing their movements. Then, from the edge of an open clearing, a Navy Corpsman emerged. Every eye, Japanese and American alike, tracked him as he crossed the sand. The enemy opened fire immediately, bullets striking the coral and sand with lethal rhythm. Yet he moved without hesitation, kneeling beside the Marine with deliberate calm. His hands were steady as he ripped open the bandages, applied sulfa powder, and inserted a morphine syringe. Each motion precise, each gesture measured. The Marine, initially terrified, felt his panic recede under the calm authority of the Corpsman's touch. Nearby, other wounded Marines watched, their eyes widening. Their own fear began to shift into a fragile confidence. From a Japanese observation post, the scene was surreal. Officers scribbled notes in their diaries. He walked into the hail of bullets and crouched to aid the wounded. Not once did he flinch. Not once did his focus waver. Our men hesitated, unsure if killing him would affect the others. The psychological impact was immediate. Japanese snipers, expecting panic and disarray, hesitated as the Corpsman worked. This pause, brief as it was, allowed several nearby Marines to regroup and push forward under cover. The Corpsman did not move alone. A stretcher team followed at a measured distance, carrying the wounded out of the kill zone. Each step was coordinated, practiced, almost ritualistic. The medic's comm radiated outward, transforming chaos into a controlled rhythm. The battlefield, previously defined by unpredictability and fear, now had a microcosm of order, centered on one individual committed to life. For the American command, these moments were invaluable. Every Marine stabilized and evacuated meant a stronger unit at the front line. It allowed for counterattacks, consolidation of captured ridges, and continued pressure on the Japanese positions. The calm under fire, repeated across dozens of similar instances throughout the day, cumulatively altered the tempo of the battle. The turning point was not marked by explosions or mass casualties, but by observation. The Japanese realized that American units could absorb shock, recover rapidly, and continue pressing forward, regardless of losses. The presence of medics, calm and composed under fire, had introduced a factor that no amount of fortification or firepower alone could neutralize. For the first time, Japanese strategy faltered, not because of numerical inferiority, but because the psychological expectation of panic had been overturned. Reports from the battlefield note repeated instances where corpsmen moved into open fire to reach multiple casualties in succession. In one documented case, a single medic attended to 3 Marines, each severely wounded, across 50 meters of open terrain. The Japanese, aiming to capitalize on these exposed movements, found themselves ineffective. The calmness of one individual had disrupted tactical calculations, forcing defenders to reconsider priorities under the stress of a prolonged assault. Even when the medics themselves were injured, the discipline held. Corpsmen were trained to continue until the immediate threat to life was addressed. Evacuation could wait. Stabilization could not. This focus created a paradox. In exposing themselves to the highest risk, they reduced the overall risk to the unit. The Marines around them were emboldened, maintaining cohesion in situations that could have easily descended into chaos. By midday, the battlefield bore witness to countless similar moments. Corpsmen traversed open fields, caves, and ridges, attending to wounded Marines while under constant observation. Japanese soldiers noted the phenomenon repeatedly. These men moved calmly, deliberately, and with purpose, unaffected by terror. Their actions, small and precise, were altering the very psychology of the battlefield. It was here, in these moments of deliberate care amidst carnage, that the first seeds of the turning point were sown. The Japanese defenses, while formidable, could not account for a force that combined courage, discipline, and technical skill so seamlessly. The medics' calm had shifted the perception of the Americans from panicked invaders to unshakable opponents, and this perception would soon translate into operational consequences that neither side could ignore. By late afternoon, Peleliu's terrain was a labyrinth of blood, smoke, and shattered coral. The American advance had slowed to a crawl, impeded by hidden machine gun nests and snipers firing from caves along the ridges. Casualties mounted, and the Japanese defenders sensed the desperation of the assault. Yet in the midst of chaos, a recurring image confounded them. Corpsmen moving calmly across open ground, attending to wounded Marines with methodical precision. One notable incident occurred near a ridge called Bloody Nose Ridge, a focal point of Japanese defense. A squad of Marines had been pinned under fire for nearly 40 minutes, unable to advance or retreat without certain casualties. A corpsman, hearing their calls, emerged from cover. Machine guns opened fire almost instantly. Bullets tore through sand and rock, but the corpsman moved deliberately, sliding into a prone position beside a severely wounded Marine. He administered sulfa powder to prevent infection, applied a morphine syringe, and signaled to a stretcher team. The wounded Marine, bleeding heavily and in shock, gradually regained composure under the medic's steady hands. Nearby Marines, witnessing the act, found renewed courage. They began to crawl forward, using the brief lull created by the Japanese hesitation to secure higher ground. Japanese observers were struck by the phenomenon. One diary entry reads, "We fired at him, aiming carefully, yet our men hesitated. The others did not panic. It was as if his calm had passed to them. We could not believe it." This pause, brief yet critical, allowed American units to consolidate positions that had previously been considered untenable. Elsewhere, similar scenarios unfolded repeatedly. Corpsmen moved between craters and ridges, attending to multiple casualties in succession. The cumulative effect was extraordinary. Wounded Marines were stabilized quickly, entire squads maintained cohesion, and the tempo of the assault, previously dictated by fear and fire, began to shift. Japanese gunners, expecting panic and disorder, found themselves unable to exploit vulnerability. The medic's calm became a force in its own right. The psychological impact extended beyond immediate engagement. Marines under fire reported that seeing a corpsman work with composure inspired confidence, not only in survival, but in mission execution. They advanced with purpose, knowing that even if struck, they would not be abandoned. In tactical terms, this allowed platoons to execute coordinated assaults on Japanese strongpoints that had seemed impenetrable only hours before. By nightfall, the battlefield reflected a subtle yet decisive change. The Japanese had inflicted heavy casualties, but the American advance continued, slowly, painfully, yet relentlessly. The calm presence of corpsmen had introduced a new variable, the impossibility of demoralizing an entire unit when its lifeline remained intact. The defenders, previously confident in their ability to halt the assault through attrition, faced a reality in which courage, discipline, and technical skill could not be undone by bullets or fear. In one final act that defined the turning point, a corpsman crossed an exposed beach under fire to reach 3 separate wounded Marines trapped near a machine gun nest. The Japanese fired relentlessly, yet hesitated to take lethal aim, unsure if targeting the medic would disrupt the Americans' composure. The corpsmen stabilized each casualty in succession, signaled evacuation teams, and moved again, completing a feat that became emblematic of the campaign. By the end of the day, dozens of Marines owed their lives to similar acts of deliberate bravery, and the Japanese defenders had begun to recalibrate their strategy, now aware that American resilience could not be counted on to falter. This sequence of deliberate, calm action marked the psychological and operational turning point of Peleliu. The Japanese defenses, formidable and deeply entrenched, were now countered not only by firepower, but by the unyielding composure of medics whose courage altered the rhythm of the battle. The combination of human bravery, technical skill, and moral clarity created a battlefield truth. Calm under fire could become as decisive as any artillery barrage. The day closed with smoldering ridges, wounded Marines being evacuated under the watchful eyes of their comrades, and Japanese soldiers reassessing the resolve of their opponents. The impact of the medics was clear. They had not merely saved lives, they had shifted momentum. The battle's course was now influenced by an unexpected force, one grounded in courage, training, and the unwavering commitment to preserve life amidst the most extreme conditions imaginable. As dusk settled over Peleliu, the island bore the scars of relentless combat. Sand was churned with footprints, craters pocked the beaches, and smoke from artillery smoldered in the heat. The cost of the assault was immediately evident. Of the roughly 11,000 Japanese defenders, the vast majority had been killed or severely wounded. American forces had suffered heavily as well. Over 1,200 Marines killed and nearly 5,000 wounded in the first 2 weeks of fighting. Yet amidst this devastation, one striking observation emerged repeatedly in after-action reports. The calm composure of the Navy Corpsmen had prevented the collapse of entire units and allowed for a steadier advance than originally anticipated. Casualty reports detailed how Corpsmen moved under extreme conditions, stabilizing Marines with severe injuries and ensuring evacuation to aid stations or field hospitals. Their presence directly increased survival rates. Medics reached casualties who would have otherwise bled to death in the chaos. Official accounts noted that Marines often attributed their perseverance to the knowledge that someone would be there to care for them immediately. The psychological reassurance offered by calm medics became a critical factor in maintaining unit cohesion under continuous enemy fire. Japanese observers, too, recorded the impact. Diaries and post-war interviews emphasized the incomprehensible bravery and composure of the medics. One Japanese officer wrote, "We had trained to instill fear, to watch our enemy crumble under fire. But these men, these medics, defied every expectation. They moved steadily among the wounded, and the Marines fought with renewed determination. It was as if the very act of saving life bolstered the fighting force beyond measure." Such reflections highlighted a central lesson. Courage that preserves life can be as influential as courage that delivers death. The aftermath was not limited to immediate battlefield consequences. Units that survived due to medics' interventions were able to hold positions longer, regroup for subsequent assaults, and maintain operational momentum. Reports from company and battalion commanders noted that the consistent presence of trained medical personnel allowed leaders to plan maneuvers with reduced risk of panic or disorder. In essence, the Corpsman's calm had transformed individual acts of heroism into a strategic advantage, reinforcing the American advance in ways that artillery and rifles alone could not achieve. Medical logistics were also impacted. Hospitals and aid stations reported receiving fewer critically destabilized casualties than expected, a direct result of timely field interventions. This allowed for more effective triage and treatment, ensuring that severely wounded Marines had a better chance of long-term survival. Nurses, doctors, and corpsmen coordinated seamlessly, and post-campaign evaluations attributed a measurable improvement in survival rates to the efficiency and composure of frontline medics. The psychological toll on Japanese forces was equally significant. Commanders noted a subtle erosion of morale, as the expected panic of American units did not materialize. Medics' calm presence created a perception of invulnerability that challenged conventional Japanese assumptions about battlefield psychology. Units accustomed to exploiting fear were forced to confront a reality in which American forces maintained cohesion under conditions that would have previously ensured chaos. This unexpected resilience altered enemy tactics and, in some cases, delayed assaults or reduced the intensity of counterattacks. Eyewitness testimonies provide further insight. A Marine recounted, I saw him cross open ground, bullets kicking up all around, and I thought, he has to die. But he didn't. He treated my buddy, then another, then another. Each time, we found ourselves moving again, finding courage we didn't know we had. These moments, multiplied across hundreds of corpsmen and countless wounded Marines, shaped the outcome of skirmishes that would determine control of critical ridges and strongpoints across the island. The first phase of Aftermath also highlighted a broader truth about warfare. Heroism could manifest in ways that did not involve killing, destruction, or direct confrontation with the enemy. The calm discipline of the medics on Peleliu provided both a psychological shield and a tactical advantage, demonstrating that battlefield influence extended beyond the immediate strike of weapons. In this environment, saving life became a form of combat power, altering both morale and operational outcomes. As the smoke of battle cleared over Peleliu, the consequences of the campaign became starkly visible. Entire ridges lay stripped of vegetation, craters scarred the coral, and skeletons of bunkers and pillboxes marked the intensity of the struggle. The battle had inflicted massive casualties, yet the resilience of American forces remained a defining feature. Corpsmen had repeatedly moved through open fire to save the wounded, their calm and precision ensuring that squads maintained cohesion and momentum even under extreme pressure. The psychological and operational effects of their actions extended beyond immediate survival. They shaped the tactical outcomes of entire sectors of the island. The survival of so many Marines, despite fierce Japanese resistance, reinforced lessons about the importance of medical support in combat planning. Commanders recognized that the presence of trained medics influenced both morale and combat effectiveness. Units with active corpsmen could execute riskier maneuvers, hold forward positions longer, and recover faster from ambushes or artillery strikes. In some instances, the calm composure of medics allowed entire platoons to retake ridges that had been temporarily lost, simply by stabilizing the wounded and restoring confidence among survivors. Japanese forces, for their part, were forced to reassess their assumptions about American behavior. Post-war interviews with Japanese veterans and officers highlighted their astonishment at the medics' conduct. One officer reflected, "We had expected panic. We had expected confusion. Yet they moved with serenity among the wounded. Their calm emboldened the others, and our tactics could not break them as we anticipated." This acknowledgement underscores the unique intersection of human psychology and battlefield effectiveness. The idea that courage under pressure can reshape operational outcomes. The campaign's lessons also influenced broader strategic thinking. American military planners noted that disciplined medical response could act as a force multiplier. The ability to stabilize casualties quickly allowed units to sustain offensive pressure, reduce attrition, and maintain morale across extended operations. Field manuals and training programs were subsequently updated to emphasize rapid care under fire, the coordination of stretcher teams, and the psychological impact of calm, visible medical intervention on both friendly and enemy forces. The experiences on Peleliu would echo in later campaigns, from Okinawa to the final assaults toward Japan, demonstrating that battlefield medicine was not ancillary, but central to operational success. In addition to strategic lessons, the campaign left a profound human imprint. Veterans recounted the influence of medics on their own courage, describing moments when seeing a corpsman work calmly among the wounded renewed their resolve. These narratives, preserved in diaries and oral histories, attest to the broader impact of calm under fire. It created a ripple effect, strengthening morale, shaping decision-making, and ultimately, influencing the battle's trajectory. Casualty statistics further illuminate the effect. While the Marines suffered thousands of wounded, survival rates for those reached promptly by corpsmen were significantly higher than expected under such heavy fire. Every life saved reinforced the perception of resilience and determination, creating a feedback loop that encouraged further advancement and reinforced unit cohesion. In contrast, Japanese forces faced both attritional losses and the psychological strain of observing Americans continue to advance despite overwhelming adversity. Finally, post-war analysis emphasized the lasting impression on Japanese observers. Many noted that the Corpsmen's calm, selfless actions were a phenomenon entirely outside their expectations of battlefield behavior. The experience challenged assumptions about human psychology in combat, illustrating that bravery could be expressed not solely through aggression, but through steadfast care for others. This understanding would later inform Japanese military studies, highlighting the broader significance of morale, discipline, and the human element in determining combat outcomes. By the end of the Peleliu campaign, the narrative was clear. The battlefield had been altered not just by rifles, mortars, or strategic planning, but by the composure of a single type of soldier, men dedicated to saving life amidst chaos. The calm courage of the Navy Corpsmen had not only preserved countless lives, but had shaped the psychological and operational contours of the engagement. Their influence would resonate far beyond the island, leaving a lasting legacy in military history.